Unless you're a real fan of Apple products, you're probably not much of a fan of waiting in line. This week, predictably, people queued up by the dozens and by the hundreds in front of Apple stores around the world. Tokyo reported a lineup nearly 1,000 people deep. In London, people were grabbing a spot in line a full week before the company's latest phone went on sale.
Okay, so my name is Ryan Williams, and I'm currently first place in the Covent Garden Apple store in London, which is one of the flagship stores in London.
Ryan and his friend set themselves up on September 14th. But before you roll your eyes at Ryan's fanboy loyalty, check out why he's really there.
So I'm doing it for a charity called Cancer Research UK, which is one of the biggest charities in the UK. And I'm doing it through the fact that one of my friends has just been diagnosed with cancer. So I think it's quite an interesting method to raise money for this charity.
Did you get that? Ryan is in line to raise money for cancer research. He knows these lines get media attention, so he's using that attention to the advantage of his cause.
Apple queues are really the only thing that people are prepared to queue about a week for. It's just Apple products generate so much sort of hype and interest.
Ryan is not the only one who's realized the marketing potential of an iPhone lineup. The first man in line in New York City is promoting his own social media app. There's a band trying to drum up some self-promotion, and protesters from the Occupy Wall Street movement staged an Occupy Apple protest while waiting in line. At Toronto's Eaton Centre, Apple employees handed out coffee and water to those waiting for the store to open. To passers-by, it's bizarre. Americans spend 37 billion hours a year waiting in lines. The Canadian estimate is around 4 billion hours. And yet, here's a line people actually want to be in. Dick Larson understands why. He's a professor in the engineering department at MIT. He's also called Dr. Q for his studies of queuing behavior, and he's in his office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Hello.
Brett, how are you doing? Good to meet you.
Nice to talk to you. A lot of people, when they see lineups for iPhones or any new product, are puzzled. Why would you wait in line for something you don't need to wait in line for?
Well, this is like lining up for rock star concerts and other social events, and I think the line is not like the line that you and I might have waiting for a bank teller or waiting for tickets to go into a movie. The people who line up, to use the Canadian word for queue or waiting line, as other countries do, view it as a social experience. They can use their space and sell it to somebody else or give it to their parents later on, and it's probably bragging rights maybe for the next 10 years.
Well, the Apple lines seem to be exceptional for a number of reasons, including the fact that they are almost always peaceful. I think there was one in China that turned violent. But why don't they become chaotic or ugly the way that Black Friday or Boxing Day lines sometimes do?
It seems to me that the people who queue up or go into lineups for the Apple products are like-minded, typically people in their 20s. They abide by the first come, first serve, and it's just part of the party, part of the unwritten rules of behavior. Whereas Black Friday seems to be so competitive. I mean, people want to get there at 4 o'clock in the morning when or some stores actually open up at midnight, 1 minute after midnight on Black Friday. And there's just this rush to get in and get the best bargains because the stores for the first 2 or 3 hours will often give deep discounts. And it's survival of the fittest. I've been in a couple of those situations, and it is quite chaotic. And some of these queues can get quite dangerous, actually. This is, I think, in North America, kind of an exception, the Black Friday kind of thing. Whereas in other parts of the world, queuing is more or less like this on a daily basis.
Well, let's go back to China for a moment. Why do queues basically not exist in some parts of the world?
They just don't have that culture. Even in Europe, you see the queues in Northern Europe are much better behaved, first come, first serve, compared to the Mediterranean, Southern Europe. And it's a cultural phenomenon. Even in the U.S., there are different queuing behaviors in Washington, D.C. versus New York or Boston. And in China, it says, if you look at Hong Kong and mainland China, one country, two systems. Well, the queuing in Hong Kong is quite different from the queuing in Beijing. And I think that's because the British actually ran the Hong Kong for about 100 years and gave them their first come, first serve queuing culture, whereas the mainland China is different. It's an emerging economy growing very, very fast. I have videos that I've seen where people queuing for the subway in Beijing literally crawl on top of the shoulders of the people in front of them to get to the head of the line.
Oh, my gosh. Well, but Americans spend a lot of time in queues. I read a stat that 37 billion hours a year collectively are spent waiting in line. What is your top tip on keeping cool in a queue?
Well, first of all, if you're in an iPhone queue, you're already cool because you want to be there. You've voluntarily chosen it, so you're already at ease. But if you're in a momentary imprisonment waiting to do your grocery shopping or buy something at a mall store or something like this, my advice is to put away the electronic gadgets and actually start something that's so retro it's maybe cool. Start a face-to-face conversation with one of your queue neighbors. And basically, if that goes well, you'll actually be discouraged by the time your service starts because your conversation is going to be over.
Wow, that sounds almost radical.
Well, it's meant to be, but I've tried it myself, and I've never had a bad experience.
Professor Larson, it was great to talk to you. Thank you for being with us.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Professor Richard Larson, that's Dr. Q to you, teaches at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts.